Hi, this is Andy. Let's say you're sitting in a meeting tomorrow for a project that you're leading and you're looking to get sign off, let's say. And based on the pre meetings you've had with stakeholders, you work through stuff, so you think it's going to go pretty smoothly. But seemingly out of the blue now in this meeting, a key stakeholder speaks up and starts sharing objections. I mean, right there in front of everyone, which includes your boss, by the way, things are starting to derail and you feel some anger starting to build up. If we could see a thought bubble over you, it might be saying something like, I can't believe they're sabotaging this. They didn't bring any of this up when we talked about it before the meeting. They're throwing me and my project under the bus. You know what? That's a key leadership moment right there. Now, maybe for you it's different. Maybe it's a demanding boss or a deeply emotional situation outside of work. But the key issue is this. How do we respond? Does it help? Or do we make it worse? How do we navigate the emotional roller coaster of leading teams and projects and families and friendships? Our ability to do that can make an enormous difference in our careers and life. Today we're continuing a series of episodes on that topic, and I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Julia DeGangi. For many years, Julia has worked with individuals who have endured the worst traumas, from survivors of domestic abuse to combat veterans, and helped them transform their energy and rise to powerful new heights. You'll know what that means today. Based on her experience, she's recently published a remarkable, insightful new book entitled Energy Rising, The Neuroscience of Leading with Emotional Power. What I love about this book is that it gives a perspective on navigating the emotional challenges of our life in a way I have never seen in any other books. It's deeply based in research and practice, but it's accessible to all of us, even if we don't know our amygdala from our anterior cingulate cortex, and I have no idea what that means. So before we start, this subject is so relevant to the uncertainty emotions that people face with their careers. I have to say, you probably know someone who graduated from college and knew exactly what they wanted to do, but I've seen a growing number of people who are not like that. They dread being asked the question, so what's your career plan? When it comes to their career, they have no freaking idea. And I bring this up because we have a new course entitled just that, No Freaking Idea, How to Navigate Career Uncertainty. It's a career guide for people who are struggling with uncertainty about what they want to do. And just like we're often not taught about navigating our emotions growing up, we're often not taught how to build a career plan. And that's what this course does. And the feedback's been fantastic. So whether you enroll to help you think through next steps in your career, or you want to gift a license to a son or daughter or someone else learn more by going to nofreakingidea.peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Thanks. Let's jump into today's discussion with Julia about her new book, Energy Rising. Julia, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Andy, I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, I've been waiting for this. We'll get into ideas from your book in a bit, but I'd love to ask you this. If someone would have told 16-year-old Julia that she'd be sitting across from people who've gone through deep traumas, listening to their stories, helping them rise out of the pain, how would you have responded back then?
16-year-old me. Well, actually, I sort of have a natural inclination for psychology, and that's because I come from kind of a lineage of psychologists. So my father is a psychologist, for example, and he's a very, very brilliant man, also a very complicated man. A lot of us who are drawn to the field of mental health have a lot of reasons to be drawn to the field. And he would just always have the most thoughtful, thought-provoking, inspiring stories about human behavior. So I think at a very young age, I was very comfortable with people and emotions. Like, here's kind of a funny story. I am not great at small talk. I'm just not naturally good at it. So when my high school friends would pick me up around age 16, they would be like, okay, DeGangi, you have 5 questions all night. Use them wisely. I'm going to get the party so tell me about your mom. I think the thing that's the surprise, though, is that I became a psychologist. I became a neuropsychologist. I always thought psychology was my father's domain. He wasn't territorial about it. I was just like, oh, that's what my dad does, so I'm going to do something new. My mother was a teacher of immigrants. My brother is significantly disabled. So I kind of grew up with really thinking about human behavior and human suffering, and also being told both directly and indirectly that the reason I'm on this planet is for service, right, to sort of serve people. So I did a lot of political work at the White House on US presidential campaigns. I then took that kind of advocacy spirit and did a lot of international development, international humanitarian aid. And the thing that really started to strike me was that, isn't it interesting that whether I'm in Detroit or Nairobi or Lagos or Chicago or wherever I was on the planet, conflict always looked like conflict.
Yeah.
Loss always felt like loss. Hope always felt like hope. Rage always felt like rage. And so I really started to think, like, what is it about this universal inner environment, meaning our nervous system and our biology, that drives all these external things, right? These problems, these situations, these relationships. And so that's my very windy path to becoming a neuropsychologist.
Oh, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing that story because, we all know what emotions feel like. Even as you said that, rage is rage and happiness is happiness.
Yeah.
We kind of know what they feel like. But from a neuropsychologist perspective, what are emotions? Because I don't know if I could actually define it as well as until I read your book.
I would tell you that emotions are the Google Maps of your life. Okay? They are this supremely intelligent, they're energy, they're literally a neurochemical energy in your brain. That's this inner guidance system, right? It's telling you what relationships you should stay in and which ones you should get out of, what opportunities you want to pursue and which ones you want to pass up, when you need to go, when you need to rest. So the thing that kind of is really the crux of my work is I always say the brain is the most powerful machine you'll ever own. And a lot of us pay more attention to our cell phones than we do our own nervous systems, right? So it's this idea of like when we create so much pain and dysfunction in our own lives when we don't pay attention to this energy, this Google Maps of our life, telling us where we really need to go in our life.
That's a great way to say it. I feel like I grew up feeling like there's good emotions, bad emotions, but you don't call that. Like one of the distinctions throughout the book is the difference between emotional pain and emotional power. So would you introduce those to us, including what you mean? And how about this, what you don't mean by those? Because I think those words could mean different things to different people.
Absolutely. So let me kind of break this down. So first of all, your brain is not that big. For most of us, it weighs less than 3 pounds, and it's the most precious real estate on the planet. So the parts of your brain that organize feelings had to get pretty efficient, right? So we could kind of condense things. So anytime you feel bad, I call this emotional pain. So you might be stressed in traffic, you might be annoyed in the Starbucks line, you might be enraged by your spouse, or you might be traumatized. The parts of your brain that give rise to your bad feelings are the parts of your brain that give rise to your bad feelings. So whether you're saying you're stressed, you're irritated, you're frightened, you're mad, you're annoyed, I'm calling all of this emotional pain, okay? On the other side of that coin, and I really want to make this important point that they're not separate, they're part of the same coin, is what I call your emotional power. Now, by power, I absolutely do not mean command and control, my way or the highway. In fact, I actually think that's a form of emotional weakness when we need to try to coerce or manipulate other people. So emotional power in its most exceptional form is when I feel good, when I feel confident, when I feel self-possessed, when I feel expressed. And the word I use to really encapsulate all of this is when I feel whole. Now, what happens in our life, and I'm so glad you asked me this question, Andy, is, let me say it like this. Your brain really has 3 engines that's driving you through your life. You have your engine of thinking, you have your engine of behaving, and you have your engine of feeling or emotion. Now, I always say there's kind of a physics or a math to our emotions. People love to say like, oh, our emotions are so confusing and complex. I don't actually think that's true when you really understand what's going on. So if you were going to create a jet and you had one engine flying in one direction and then another engine flying in the exact opposite direction, you do not need to be an aerospace engineer to be like, that is a very bad design, right?
Right.
But a lot of times what happens in our lives is we feel one thing. We feel, for example, like we want rest. Yeah. And then we behave in the exact opposite direction. We overwork. Yeah. We feel like we want to speak up, but then we keep our mouth shut. We feel like we're like exhausted. We need to start saying no more often to things. What do? We say yes. So in each of those moments, I have literally divided my emotional energy, a real neurobiological energy, from the energy of my behavior. And what happens over time, obviously, if we do this occasionally, no problem. But if we're repeatedly not paying attention to this Google Maps of our life, we end up feeling annoyed, exhausted, burnt out. We have that sensation like we wake up in the morning and we're like, oh God, this thing again. Mm-hmm. But we have to and then this is the other piece that I think is really, really empowering, is we think the world is doing it to us. If the world really was doing it to us, we would be up shit creek, excuse my language, because we don't have that much influence or authority over other people. But when I start to see that in a lot of cases, I am the perpetrator of my own misery, this becomes the moment of my redemption.
Yeah. But that's an example of, there are sections of the book that I think is a bitter pill. You know, like to swallow that pill is not going to be fun, but that's where the power is. Yeah. And in fact, let's actually build on the scenario I gave in the intro, if you're up for that, Julia. Like,
totally.
This person who they kind of thought they had their ducks in a row, and maybe they were overworking and they're just trying to get everyone to like them. There's all kinds of things that might have been going on, but they thought, I think I'm going to get approval in this meeting. And then all of a sudden things start going sideways and they feel like they're getting sabotaged and, thrown under the bus. But let's say that this listener, she's tempted just to give in. All right, I'll just take the hit. I'll play it nice. That's how I always do. And it's exhausting her, okay? So we're speculating here because it's a fictional situation, but I'd love for you to give us a guided tour through her brain right now. Like, what are some of the forces at play when, like, oh, I feel this, and like, oh, I just give in. Like, I think you started in there with the kind of like the self-betrayal or self-division, but explain a little bit more. Like, what's going on?
Absolutely. I think it's a great example. So I'm at a meeting, and I think I'm like, things are moving along well, and I have this sense that people are now being adversarial to me.
Right. Right, yeah.
This is very important. So we already have to start at our point of departure. It's like, I have to have a connection to my body. Okay. So step one is have a connection to my body. So am I aware when I start to go into this, from this very powerful mode to this very reactive mode? And I should know myself. In my own case, what happens to me is I feel like all of my energy zooms into my throat. So some people will talk about, it'll happen in their stomach, or some people, they'll feel like their heart really start to pound, or some people, your hands might sweat, or some people you might start to I'll see people in meetings like tapping their pens very furiously. What that's quite literally communicating is there is a lot of activity, a lot of energy in your nervous system, and your nervous system is starting to move into, we've all heard this before, this sympathetic fight or flight state, okay? If you don't pay attention in this moment, you'll lose control of the vehicle and it will be too late. Okay. But if you can start to say, okay, when I normally start to notice there's some tension in my throat, the first step is to notice. Second step, this is so simple and so powerful. I always say, don't bite down. What I mean by this is quite literally, a little bit metaphorically, but also literally, relax your face. Wiggle your jaw. Take a deep breath. Think about releasing tension in your forehead. You cannot be aggravated and also have a relaxed face. It just physiologically doesn't go together. Okay, so that's a very concrete, actionable step. The third step, and this is so big, what's happening in the meeting, it absolutely is happening in real time. In other words, a coworker might be asking some pretty provocative questions, but I will tell you, the majority of that energy, you are not responding in real time. You are responding to ghosts. Meaning, this person, what you're really doing, and this is happening so unconsciously, but we have this old coding that people never listen to me, or things never work out for me. I was just talking to someone earlier today, and the person said, see, no one can be trusted. Okay? That's a pretty, what we would call black or white or catastrophic thought. So in the meeting, my coworker is kind of making some questions to me that I feel like are a little bit, they're certainly not easy. Let me put it that way. What I now need to do on step 3 is, can I assume no negative intent? Because what happens, oh my God, this happens so often, Andy, in workplace settings, because I work with teams all the time, is someone is confused and we interpret the confusion as aggression.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
This is something that is so powerful for your listeners. We egregiously underestimate how horrific confusion is to the human brain. I will tell you that the 2 top hated emotions, this is just me anecdotally, I've done this work for a long time. One of them is confusion. And this is the reason why. Your brain is a pattern detection machine, okay? It's moving you through your life going apple, 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 fill in the blank, apple. So in order to be a pattern detector, it needs to close the pattern. So if someone asks me a question, kind of in a neutral energy, or asking me a question that I'm a little bit caught off guard by, my pattern detector must close the pattern. And in the absence of clear, positive information, my brain is much more interested in my protection. So it will close the pattern in a way that causes me to assume someone else is being aggressive to me so that I will be vigilant, so that I will be on guard. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, makes sense.
So then we create this mess in our life. It's like, no, that person was just confused. And then what we know, this is another big piece, and tell me if I'm going too quickly here, but neuroscience shows us that emotion is literally a thing of contagion. We literally catch each other's emotions, okay? You know this already because you've been in a good mood. You walk into a room where people aren't in a good mood, and your mood sinks like a lead balloon. So if someone genuinely asks me a question in the energy of curiosity, like, hey, Julia, I don't understand why you put this on the agenda, and I get activated and respond in the energy of aggression, well, Tim, the reason is because you're basically an idiot. Those are not the words coming out of my mouth, but that's definitely the energy. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen to their nervous system? And so then what happens is, I call this in the book, and I think this is such a helpful point, that we get in these emotional tugs of war, where we're creating the very emotional experience we say we don't want. And if we're truly leaders, we not only do we have to think about emotion, but let me tell you, this is what I think the best definition of leader is. The best definition of leader is whoever has the most powerful emotional energy in the room. The reason this really came through for me, Andy, is because I work with families a lot. I work with these very competent, high-functioning parents who are literally brought to their knees because they have a difficult 4-year-old. And I believe me, I understand how intense parenting can be. But in those moments, the most powerful person in the room, i.e. the leader, is the child with the strongest emotional energy.
That's interesting.
And the other thing to know too is, like, having the strongest emotional energy does not mean being the loudest or the most over the top. It means having the clearest emotional signal. If I'm curious, is my energy genuinely curious? If I'm interested in connecting with you, am I genuinely tapped into connecting? If I say authenticity is a priority on this team, do I genuinely show up in the energy of authenticity? Because emotion is our native languages as a human being. We all came out, every single one of us, reading a language of emotion. So you can't fool your mother tongue.
That's a good way to say it. We have a new grandson who actually lives not too far from us in the Chicago area, and we spend a lot of time with him. And he he knows how to express emotion, right? But it's interesting that you say this because we think of secondhand smoke. There's secondhand stress based on what you're saying, right? That it spills over to these other people. I was buying a car once, and the sales manager just came over and go, "Well, what about this?" I had not met him yet. I just said to him, I said, "I like to start with hello," and he goes, "Oh," it changed the tone, right? And so, what can we do to kind of change in the moment? I guess that's leadership in that moment. I'm sure I've screwed that up more than not, but still, this idea of what are we bringing our energy, because that is not only going to affect our inner world, but it's going to affect the world of the people around us. If I understood you right.
Totally. And like one thing, and you'll probably know this from your own expertise in your own work, is I'm brought in a lot to help with the neuroscience of employee engagement or employee retention. So what I have found is overwhelmingly people are good. They want to be kind to their employees. They want to do right by their employees. So they'll say, "What can I do to motivate, inspire, and engage my team?" And I'll say, "That's a fantastic question." Right. And we'll get to that. I just have a couple of questions first. How inspired are you? I cannot tell you how many times because whenever I do engagements, I'll do like, with C-suite or whatever, I'll meet individually and then as a group with the leadership, that people will behind closed doors be crying to me. It's so stressful here. People don't get along. What I want people to understand is that emotions are a currency. So how can you give the energy of inspiration or motivation or engagement if you don't possess that within yourself? This is, if I had to say the number one thing that I think would totally transform people's leadership, it's this. It's that your job is not to inspire the people on your team. Your job is to inspire yourself and trust that they will feel the legitimate energy of your inspiration.
That's so good. Man, I think of that as a parent sometimes. I think of that as a even as a podcast host. I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and I go, "So how do you feel before we start?" And they're like, kind of low energy, quite frankly. I'm like, "All right, I'm going to ramp it up here." Right? Like we affect the people more than we realize. The thing is, we don't see ourselves, right? So we don't realize the effect we're having on them.
I mean, I'll just tell you, you're so right. As like I always say, the strongest form of leadership on the planet is the parent-child relationship, just because of the neurobiology of it. I have a little 5-year-old, and I was helping her put away her laundry. And when I do tasks, I tend to speak to myself like it helps, like, okay, get this done, and then do this, and then do this. Like I can be a little bit of like a taskmaster. And so she said to me, "Mama, I don't like the way that you're talking to me." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, Clara Rose. I'm just trying to be helpful." And then we kept doing it. And she said, "Mama, you're still talking to me that way." And then I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I'm trying to be helpful." And she goes, "The words coming out of your mouth tell me that you're trying to be helpful, but the way you're talking to me is making me want to cry."
Oh, my goodness. Brilliant. Right?
So even though my words were like, "I'm here to help you, and I'm going to put this away, and like we can fold it like this," the emotional energy was I was probably stressed out and annoyed that I'm still doing like my husband does a lot too, I want to be clear, but we have little kids. Yeah. And so what I want to make clear to your listeners is that it almost doesn't matter what we say or do. The impetus is always about the emotional energy. It's just how humans are wired to work.
Oh, so good. Man, I love it when, the brilliance out of a babe, right? It's like a 5-year-old, right? It's like, yeah, I love it. You kind of went down the path of like with our teams or staff, whatever. And I want to give you a situation that's really, it's kind of near and dear to me right now because of a situation I'm close enough to. It's a staffing sort of decision. And do we keep the person or not? Okay. And so it's somebody who, nice enough person, right? Nice enough person. In fact, everyone likes this person, but pretty senior and just isn't delivering, just not doing what the role is. And so the pain that comes from that is other people are having to pick it up and starting to get resentful. But there's also this pain of letting somebody go. And it's a culture, this organization in particular, it's a culture where we don't like letting people go, especially people that we like. Mm-hmm. And so there's division there, and self-division in the sense of, well, let's just not do anything. And another quarter goes by, another half year goes by, and we're still dealing with the same thing. And the truth is, it's exhausting people. Okay. So what I'm interested in is your first code that you have, the neuroenergetic codes, if I remember what it's called. Two of the messages in that first one is pick a more powerful pain, if I remember that right, and to hold your emotional shake. So for the person that is in this situation, the boss of the person who's not performing, they've been actually not picking a more powerful pain, right? They just have been putting up with it. So what does it mean to pick a more powerful pain and to hold your emotional shake in a situation like that?
Awesome question. And certainly one I think we can all relate to. Like, people have disappointed us and then the situation just languishes. I want to go back to this idea of the brain in confusion. Okay. So let's go to this point of like picking a more powerful pain. One of the things that helps you become so much more powerful and satisfied and make progress in your life is to recognize that what it means to be human is to endure pain. So I think a lot of us have this fantasy, and it's certainly a very natural one, there's no shame in it, that there's a pain-free option. And so what we'll do a lot of times is we'll then start to engage in these avoidance behaviors. Well, I'm not going to have the tough conversation because like that's the pain-free option. I'm not going to take the risk because that's the pain-free option. But trying to outrun pain is like trying to, I don't know, make gravity make things fall up. Right? It's just a fool's errand. And the sooner we can say, this is just a requisite part of what it means to be human, I then get to say, okay, if no pain is not an option, then for the love of God, let me choose the pain that empowers me the most deeply. So what I find, and I don't know if this is true in your case, you can tell me, but what I never fail to see is either number one, no one has ever really communicated with this. I think it's a man. No one has ever really communicated with this man about his performance in a direct way. Now, people will say all kinds of things like, I communicated in code, or I gave a less than stellar performance review. If you really want to improve the relationship, you need to do two things. One, communicate at a level where you feel vulnerable. Meaning you're going to kind of emotionally shake. You're going to feel a little bit exposed. You're going to feel anxious. This is a good sign. Okay. And here's the other piece of this. And this is some people will do number one and forget to do number two. And so this is, I think, a powerful addition. Ask the person to say back to you what they think you said. I do a lot of work in organizational settings with teams, and then in homes with parents and couples. So let me just tell you this. All the time in couples, I will see one person in the couple say, I told him that I don't really feel loved, and he hasn't done anything about it. And maybe the guy, for example, or it could be the woman, will say, what are you talking about? Ever since you told me that, I started, I don't know, taking out the garbage more or asking you to like watch Netflix with me more. And then the other person will say, oh, that's not what I meant. So if we have to understand that communication by nature of there being two different nervous systems involved must be bidirectional. So have, number one, an honest conversation, and then ask the person to say back to you what you think you communicated, because you will be shocked and empowered to learn that a lot of times people will go, I think you want me to do X, Y, and Z, which then gives you the power to say, oh, no, I'm sorry if I miscommunicated. I mean A, B, and C. Does that help clarify?
Totally makes sense. I can think of a friend who does a fair amount of marriage counseling. One time he said something along the lines of, a lot of times issues with relationships are missed expectations, but often not stated. And I think that applies to what you're saying, right? Like there's these expectations or whatever, but they're sufficient. And maybe I thought, well, I said it, but it was more like dropping hints, or there was distance
all
between
the time.
what I said.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Andy. I was working with someone recently where basically she is a very emotionally intelligent, like very emotionally effective HR manager. And she's working with a manager who's very gruff, okay? And so the manager is having problems with one of his employees and keeps sending the employee to the HR director. And the HR director is getting frustrated. So I'm involved in this organization for a variety of reasons. And she says, like, I need him to stop sending me. I need him to handle his own situation, basically. And I said, have you ever said that to him?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, no, but like, I'll make comments like, you can handle this too. But I'm like, a very powerful, adult, competent conversation where everyone is assuming good intent has never transacted. No. So we have, I kind of coach in this, and like, we bring them in together. We have a really powerful, and he goes, oh, I just thought like you did it better and you didn't mind doing it.
Yeah.
Do you see how like, because if you really understand what the blockade, and this is the message I am put on this planet to share. People will say, oh, the challenge or the barrier is situational, or it's logistics, or it's financial, or it's time. No. It is always, and maybe I should say like 99% of the time, emotional. Until I am willing to sit with my own emotions inside of my own flesh, my feelings of anxiety, my feelings of arousal, my feelings of anxiety, my feelings of frustration, my feelings of inadequacy, my feelings of fear, I cannot get more powerful.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this conversation, you said, what is the relationship between emotional pain and emotional power? It is simply this. Every single thing that you want in this lifetime is waiting for you immediately on the other side of these feelings you think you can't feel. Yeah. If you want more self-confidence, you have to learn to work with the energy of doubt. If you want more peace, you have to learn to work with the energy of uncertainty. If you want more authority, more influence, you have to learn how to work with the energy of being misunderstood or potentially rejected. Yeah. There's a math to this.
That's so good. But I want door C, Julia, that it's like no pain, but you make it clear in the book, like you said, it's a fool's errand. That's not there. So since it's not there, let's look at better ways. And for some reason, there's so many ideas in your book that I resonate with, but one of them was the pain tree. And I was just sharing this with an employee this morning of talking through. I would love if you would kind of walk us through the pain tree, because I think too often I want to blame the leaves. Okay? So would you explain what that actually means?
I will. So I am not an arborist, so I'm going to make this tree as simple as possible. So most trees have three things, right? They have leaves, they have trunks, and they have roots. So the leaves in this analogy is all of the painful situations in your life. So this is like, these people did X to me. She said Y to me. You should have done A to me. They didn't do C to me. Right? It's all these situations that we look at. Again, there's no shame in this for two reasons. First of all, the brain is reactively processing what's immediately in your awareness. So that's just how the brain works. And to shift ourselves to a more powerful relationship with our brain and then our lives, we have to have powerful conversations like the one you and I are having right now. Okay? So a lot of times we spend, our tree is sick, our tree is in pain, we're not loving what's happening with our tree, and we spend our entire life trying to heal the health of our tree by going leaf by leaf by leaf by leaf. This is pure lunacy. Okay, you cannot heal a tree like this. I don't know anything about trees. I already know this, okay? All right, so when I work with people, or people are, pretty psychologically minded, people are like, okay, I kind of get that all of this is not just about the situation before me. I'm being triggered by something deeper. And so they'll start to go into the trunk. Now, the trunk is a lot of times this energy of anger. I'm just frustrated, I'm irritated, I'm stressed out, I'm mad. Now, as someone who's treated a lot of trauma, I want to say that anger is a very common reaction for people who've been traumatized. But anger, I think, is the most paradoxical emotion. Anger, frustration, I don't care what word we use, right? They're all kind of the same energetic frequency, if you will. They pack the illusion that you're cooking with a lot of power, but they really don't change anything at all. Anger is always a secondary emotion. What this means is, in order for me to be angry, I must be afraid of something first.
That's interesting.
Okay, so if you break into my house in the middle of the night, you bet your ass I'm going to be enraged. But the reason is I'm terrified that you're going to hurt people, you're going to take my things, etc. Okay, so I think a lot of people this day and age get it. We're in a really cool moment. Like, I've watched the evolution of emotional intelligence for 40 years, and I think we're in a great moment. So I think a lot of people will be like, yes, this is about fear. Yes, I got it. But what will happen is a lot of times there's this insidious creep back up into the leaves. Okay, well, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose this job. I'm afraid that I'm going to launch this product or this project and the client's going to hate it, or nobody's going to buy it, and I'm just going to feel like a loser. I'm afraid that they're going to get mad at me, or they're going to cancel me, whatever, okay? But can you see that very insidiously we've already crept back into the morass of the leaves? We're back at this job, this boss, this person, this reaction. Okay. So here is like one of the foundational pieces of my own career and my own life. We now leave the trunk and we go into the root system. And we come to the mother fear. The mother fear is the fear that I am fundamentally unworthy. I don't care how you say it. I am not good enough. I don't measure up. People don't like me. It is this idea or this sensation that I am fundamentally flawed. Now, we have plenty of neuroscience and psychological evidence that a human being cannot be well and feel unworthy. They're incompatible, okay? They're like going up while you're also going down. You can't make the math work. So then it's like, well, okay, I get it. Like, people don't want to feel necessarily unworthy, but I want to tell you why I'm so convinced that this energy of unworthiness is so powerful. The reason actually comes from my work with combat veterans, okay? So I have treated a lot of combat veterans, and when they first came to see me, I was like, I think for PTSD, I think I'm pretty clear what your mother fear was. Your mother fear was dying. And they were like, yeah, like plenty of them were like, I definitely did not want to die, but that is actually not the thing I was the most afraid of. The thing I was afraid of more than anything else was being the guy on the mission who didn't have his shit together. Was being the one person that other people couldn't depend on. Was being the person who could not protect his friend. Was being over and over and over, across guys, across conflicts, across continents. I was hearing the story that a fear greater than death was a fear of unworthiness. And the word I use to describe a fear of unworthiness is humiliation. Humiliation is existentially devastating to the human brain and psyche. Now, your brain is so good at its job that it does not wait for you to be humiliated. It's outside patrolling the perimeter. Could that be? Are you trying to? So let's go back to your example at the beginning where a coworker asks me a question in a meeting. What I am really thinking, if I'm powerful enough to admit it, is, oh my God, I'm going to be found out. Right. People are going to see what an idiot I am. They're going to see what an imposter I am. They're going to... Until I'm willing to work at the level of the root system, I cannot powerfully transform my life. But the second I'm willing to work there, the transformation happens. It happens so quickly. And I would not even believe this if I had not seen it through my own work over and over and over again. Also, can I just say there's no flaw in the system. We're wired to be very sensitive to dings on our sense of worthiness, okay? I'm in the middle of this book launch tour for Energy Rising, and every single time before I came on this interview with you, I'm like, hope I don't look like an idiot today. So it's well. And now I just learn to go with the pain. Yeah. You see what the earlier version of me would have been like, making myself sick. I would have been overworking or over preparing, and even earlier version of me would have been canceling. Now I'm like, let me rise with the pain. So it really becomes this expansion. What I have learned is your lungs will never stop breathing air, which also means your brain will never stop processing fear, because the number one function of your brain is to keep you alive. So if you want to get more powerful, you say, I go with the fear, not in spite of it.
That's so good, Julia. I looking at that model, perfectionism is not high standards. It is a feeling of I might not be enough, maybe, right? I mean, if I get down to the roots, right? It's like the picture can illustrate so much. How have you, when you are not feeling worthy, how do you help yourself? What's an example of something you do?
So I am very disciplined now about a few things, and I'll tell you some like easy things to do too. Is like I have a nightly journal and meditation practice, and I do it religiously, and I might do it for 4 minutes, but every single night I'm doing it, because if we, the thing that's so interesting to me is like we'll say, this is the most important thing in my life is that I like myself, or like my life feels good to me. But then we'll behave in all of these ways. Once again, we're dividing ourselves, right, from our energy. So I think we have to be powerful enough to say, can I hold myself gently, tenderly accountable in this energy of self-love? Okay. So let me first of all figure out, like, because I think a lot of times in our day, our thoughts and our emotions naturally get severed. And so if I just journal every night, it kind of brings me back into alignment. Point one. Point two, and this kind of brings me to the emotional shake, which you had asked about. We are so clear how we get physically stronger. No one is like, you know what, I can only lift 1 pound. So the way I'm going to get to lifting 10 pounds is I'm going to eat a lot of hot Cheetos and watch a lot of Netflix, right? We're like, I got to go to the gym and lift 4 pounds and then 6 pounds and then 8 pounds. It's very mathematical. The exact same thing is true of emotional loading. If I want to show up in more powerful rooms and more powerful conversations, if I say I want more, let's take influence. This seems to be a big one these days, right? It's like people want followers on social media. People think, oh, the reason I don't have followers on social media is because it's noisy out there, whatever. That's partially true. But the other thing is, until you're really able to carry the energetic load, the emotional load of being seen, and all the stuff that comes with being seen, you're not going to be able to lift that emotional weight. So it's like, I had to do a lot of practicing. I went on lots of like little, small podcasts. I went on lots of, I did a lot of Facebook lives. I'm much more comfortable in a live audience because I can read the room a little bit better, but I did enough of those and I trained. So it's like, we get physically stronger by thinking in a hierarchy. It's the exact same thing. The other thing that's so cool too is emotional energy does not belong to any situation. It belongs to the feeling of the emotion. So let's say it kind of makes me nervous to send back, let's say somebody screws up my order at Starbucks. I really didn't want that order, but like I feel bad. I don't want to tell them that they put the syrup in there and I didn't want syrup. And the reason it makes me feel anxious. If I start meeting my anxiety, hey, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but this has syrup in it. Do you mind? I'm even happy to wait. Me confronting that anxiety invariably makes me stronger. So it's like I can come into a new relationship with my emotions in any domain. I don't have to just wait for my coworker to trigger me. You see?
Right. That's good. my daughter's a barista earlier before she's at her current job, and Starbucks will write a name on the outside of the who's the name of the person, and somebody got it, and he goes, "My name is Harry, not Perry," and he threw a muffin. Okay, now that clearly wasn't about the name, right? There's other stuff going on there, and I wonder if we're the equivalent of throwing muffins at work sometimes because we're blaming the leaves. They wrote it down wrong. We don't think, well, what's actually going on, and we don't go, like you say in the book. You don't go to 20 pounds of lifting overnight. You habituate up to it. You go to 40 pounds. You habituate. So you start doing this by not avoiding difficult meetings, but going to difficult meetings, right? And,
Totally. And I don't know, do I have time to tell a story
please,
that I think will help?
please.
So in the book, in Energy Rising, I sometimes draw. So it's written for leaders who are, having, I think, relatively normal, high functioning lives. But
Yeah.
there's so much that I draw from extreme trauma. And the reason is because I think when we recover from extreme trauma, even if other people haven't had as extreme cases as us, there's something to be learned. And if it works at the extreme, there's something healing and therapeutic for us all. So I'm going to tell you a story of a combat veteran that I worked with. And this is why when we feel pain, any type of pain, whether it's, and this is important too, your brain is so sensitive to survival that your brain at the reflexive kind of animalistic primitive level does not distinguish between physical pain and emotional pain. Okay. So an example of this is if I put my hand on a hot stove, I will automatically yank my hand back. If someone makes a comment to me or triggers me in a way, I will automatically probably have some reaction, either to leave, which is flee, or to fight, or to freeze, or to fawn. Okay, so this is just automatic reactions. Great. It's just what the brain does. We just have to learn how to work with it. So when we have pain, we avoid, just like you were mentioning this coworker that no one seems to be maybe talking to as directly as possible. Okay, when it comes to PTSD is a disorder of avoidance, meaning something really horrible happened to me, and in a lot of cases, many, many years ago. And so now I avoid anything that reminds me of it. So this veteran came to me and he was not driving because he had had a lot of trauma in the context of a convoy. So even though he was back in the United States, he didn't feel safe driving. He didn't like loud noises, which meant it was very difficult for him to be around people, including his own children. He was getting in a lot of conflicts with people because irritability is a symptom of PTSD. So he finally comes to me and he's like, my life is not working. So I say, what have you been doing? And he's basically like avoiding tough things, basically at the core, avoiding hard feelings. Yeah. So I say, well, we have some wonderful, wonderful scientific evidence. And the frontline treatment for PTSD is to not only stop avoiding your trauma, but talk in very, very specific detail about the worst parts of your trauma and to record you talking about your trauma. And then you're going to go home and listen to it over and over. And this guy's like, listen, doc, I don't know if you've heard me or not, but I just told you like I've been spending decades not doing that. So I was like, I know. Some of my patients, most of my patients are just astoundingly courageous. So he's like, listen, I'm out of options. I'm going to give this a shot. So he walks into my office, week 12, okay? He's been home for decades. He's like, he waves his phone in front of my face. He's like, doc, he's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, okay, sit down. Like, tell me what's going on. He pulls out his phone. He's like, every time I listen to this recording, I fall asleep. It's dull as shit. It's stunning. Every time I tell that story, I feel like I'm
so rewarding to you at that moment, right?
For people to get their, like, anxiety is so oppressive. Yeah. Fear is so oppressive. Yeah. And the thing is, it's just like, it gets stuck in our nervous system. And if we can just move it through the emotional shake, through picking a more powerful pain, we really get access to our lives in an entirely different way. And the piece that's so powerful about that is, like, in a very short period of time, he came into an entirely new relationship with something that for years had felt so suffocating.
Yeah. He could have easily taken that to the grave, right? Yeah.
And I think a lot of us do, right? I think a lot of us are out there in our own way. So again, like, stay with the metaphor, protecting our deep, dark secret of how ugly we are. There becomes a liberation when, this might be a silly example, but I'm going to share this. It's like I was never public. I didn't really do social media. Like if I had a kid, I would like announce it on Facebook until I agreed to write this book, Energy Rising. And the reason is I feel like this is really my life's work on this planet to share this message. So when I first started like showing up on social media, I was always, like, does my hair look okay? Or is my makeup okay? And I'm like, how can I powerfully carry this work? I always talk about walking the work. And I was like, Julia, if you're trying to only look one way, talking about the value of all human emotion, like what good are you? So I just gave a Facebook Live a few minutes ago. Like I was before I got ready for your interview. Like my hair was all wonky. Like I had mascara running down my face. I was kind of emotional about something, and like even in that moment, I was like the critical voice of like girl, you should comb your hair was going, but like I was like, let it be. And the more we kind of get out the shame, the more we just let the world see, then that's only when we get to see there's no boogeyman in the closet.
Yeah, that's right. Instead of walking around the closet, open the door, right? And take a look in and take a look. There's so many things I'd love to talk to you about, Julia, but one last question, because so much of this applies to work, but outside of work, we have a lot of parents who listen to the podcast. Can you think of some examples of how one or more of these ideas, all of them I think apply to parenting, but one or two that stand out to you that parents listening could apply as they try to navigate the emotional challenges they face?
Yeah. So here's a great one. And like the classic example is like our young children or even our adolescent, I have little kids, are upset. And then we start to get activated by their distress because again, emotion is, we catch each other's emotion. And then I start to say, you need to calm down. Right. You just need to calm down. Never in the history of human beings calming down has somebody calmed down when somebody else, especially their mother, is shouting, calm down, right? Yeah. So one thing that I learned, and my God, I'm not perfect at this, but it's like, can I, when they're having a lot of emotional bigness, not bite down, put on my own oxygen mask first, relax my face, and just say this too is going to pass. I think a lot of times we think we have to fix people's emotions. Not only do you not have to, you couldn't do it if you wanted to. Okay? So the other thing I see, because I work with a lot of anxious parents, like parents who, and that meaning they're concerned, like their child has OCD or their child has, school avoidance or their child is getting bullied, right? So very significant issues. But what's interesting, and I think this is so, because the parents can feel very helpless. Like I'm trying everything, like nothing is helping my kid. But I say, just like I say with the leaders, we're totally going to get to your kid. I promise you. I know that's front and center. How are you?
That's good.
And they're like, not okay. I'm like at my wit's end. I'm stressed out. I'm living in the margins. And I'm like, can you see how if parenting is the most powerful form of leadership on the planet, one of the most soothing things we can do for your child is to take care of you?
That's good.
I feel like self-care is like having a moment in like the cultural conversation. I feel like we can exponentially improve it. Like go ahead and like get a massage or like go to the gym. Those things are important. But part of self-care is learning how to come into a new relationship with emotions we've spent most of our life trying to avoid. If we really want relief, the thing I say, I like, there's a couple of parts of the book that I just like, they're so moving to me. The reason that we have to face our emotional pain is the only person you can never escape is yourself. And if you already believe that you're not good enough or you don't deserve this or it shouldn't be you or no, then it doesn't matter if the whole world is safe to you because you already feel dangerous to yourself.
Julia, there's There's so many things that I personally benefited out of the book. Like, for example, one is the next time I'm feeling really tired, it might be because I stayed up late the night before, but I'm going to look at it. Is there some self-division going on? You know? And this idea as a dad of 5 and now 2 grandkids of what energy am I bringing to my house and to my team and things like that. So you've already impacted the Kaufman family. And for those who are listening, we've only touched on the insights. I mean, barely touched to help you navigate the emotional challenges we face. If you'd like fresh perspectives, like ones that you've not heard in other books and practices on the topic, get a copy of Dr. Julia DeGange's new book, Energy Rising. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So, Julia, thank you so much for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Andy, thank you so much. You were a phenomenal interviewer. I'm not just saying that. You have a really you have great energy. Gentle, awesome questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.